everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Have you got me, Amy?
We have. Thank you, Dan.
Great stuff. All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar. As we walk through the topic of journey to S4HANA and data governance with Maextro, please feel free for people to drop questions in the Q&A quick Q&A box, and we'll try and answer as we go, or maybe pick them up at the end. So just to kind of frame the webinar, obviously we're going to focus on the journey to S4, but this kind of presentation and methodology and key principles that we're going to share with you today is relevant even if you're on kind of, ECC 6 or already on S4. So it's still very relevant. So yeah, I'll just quickly introduce the guys around the table with me here at Bluestonex, and then they're going to kind of start framing the problem around data and some of the governance measures that you need to start thinking about. And then we're going to show you some software tools in addition to the kind of SAP tools that are kind of out there. We're going to show you our suite of software in a package called Maextro. And we'll talk through our approach. This is very much going to focus on kind of methodologies as well as kind of software tricks and tools, and we'll show you some of this stuff. So just very quickly, I see on the attendees, there's a few of our existing customers on there, so good morning. And for those of you that don't know us, Bluestonex, formed in 2012, kind of targeting gaps and apps. Maextro, which we're going to go through today, is one of those applications that we brought to market. We noticed a gap in SAP software, and that's kind of what we focus on, is where there's a gap and it's going to add some real business value, we'll build something, bring it to market, and run it through our services. So we're based in Shropshire. For those of you that don't know, this is our home, which downstairs we've got a number of offices and conference facility, and then upstairs is kind of what's happening. This is going to be our design space. So this is where we kind of create new applications, build new apps for customers, and look for that kind of value add. So you'll probably see some marketing material coming out around September, October, because we'll be running a few events with the SAP user group from this space. So, okay, me in the middle. Again, I always apologize because I look bigger than the other two next to me. So that's me, Dan. I'm one of the co-founders at Bluestonex. And with me today, I'll let them introduce themselves. I've got Feroz Khan, other co-founder, and I've got Callum Bromley.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, my name is Callum Bromley. I've been working with Bluestonex for the past 5 years now, and my main area of focus is around Maextro solution family and around our approach to master data management.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Feroz Khan. I'm the other co-founder with Bluestonex. I've got over 16 years of SAP experience, and we're currently focused on developing Maextro tool for Bluestonex.
So just to explain our kind of model as a business, for those of you, last month we're on a webinar around cloud platform. So 50% of our kind of revenue as business comes from cloud platform. That's mainly focused on user experience transformations. So we do the whole Fiori apps via two different technologies, UI5 and Slipstream, which is part of the Screen Personas family. So we use a lot of the cloud platform. We'll probably show you some of that stuff in conjunction with Maextro, and obviously 50%. The other 50% of the business is based upon Maextro and data services. So the topic that we're going to kind of talk about today is this whole concept of what you need to start thinking about. If you're on that journey and starting planning that migration to S4, or whether you're already on S4 and you haven't really got any robust kind of data governance in place. So the analogy really is about, you wouldn't take a pile of junk from your spare room with you to your new house. And it's exactly the same principles.
Yeah, so just to touch on that analogy then, so as you've seen, we actually like to use design thinking standards. So we kind of frame this problem around the analogy of what do you do when you move house. And we think this approach to data management in the S4 2B world is quite appropriate. So the scenarios we were coming up with is when you move house, you write a checklist of your prized possessions. You identify items that you should be making the move, so items critical to moving house. You identify items that require a refresh after you've moved house in the new environment, and you identify items that require special care and attention on the journey to the new house. So our focus then shifted towards all planning pre-build and post-build is essential to getting the seamless and stress-free move to S4HANA. And in the solution portfolio, we try to reflect these approaches through pragmatic means. So that led us to the Maextro solution family.
Thanks, Callum. So yeah, as Callum says, that's the kind of analogy that we kind of thought we'd focus on. But as I said, it's not just about the S4HANA move. Some of this stuff should be kind of in place within enterprises today. So data strategy is something that's quite a hot topic. Some people are starting to change their organisation to deal with data. We hear all these things about data being the new oil. Chief data officers becoming involved in organisations and the fabric of organisations. So yeah, just as a very high level, areas that we're going to kind of touch on using the software really is around the education of data, being able to measure it, putting some governance around it, and we'll talk a bit about business rules and show you some of the tool set we've got, and obviously ensuring that you've got the right technology in place. So those kind of factors really establish that governance program. Now, we've shown this a couple of times before, but these are solutions that you get from SAP. Some are quite expensive, they're licensed differently. You need a plethora of kind of skills to run some of this stuff. So there's a bunch of toolkit already there, and what the normal kind of process that when you read a lot of the literature is saying first you kind of profile data, understand it, and then you start spending a lot of time reviewing and cleansing, eventually managing that data properly in your landscape, and then associating, and then eventually end of life. So that's a kind of life cycle management when you read things within the SAP kind of toolkit. Now, where we're going to focus really today is around that whole review, cleanse, manage, because in our kind of understanding and what we see with our customers, that is the best way to approach data, because you start getting a lot of bang for your buck. So again, if you look at the numbers here, this would be SAP's approach. So understanding, profiling data, then you start reviewing it. You'll eventually start managing it properly, associating it, and then end of life. Whereas we would always start at this point, managing data. So establishing your processes, your governance, your policies, and running through those processes and solutions. Then once you have that toolkit in place with your business rules and policies, you can then start understanding your data and where your data isn't conforming to those standards and policies. And therefore, once you have those policies and rules in place, you can then obviously start running those rules over legacy data and clean your data and start periodically reviewing, what is the state of play in my enterprise, and so on and so forth. So we start a little bit differently and approach it a little bit differently to what or how other people may have done it in the past. And this actually, it does work because it's proven, and we get some nice feedback from customers on this. Okay, I'll shut up now in terms of pitching how we're gonna talk through today, and Callum's going to take us through some detail on like framing some of these data problems.
Thanks, Dan. So if we go back to kind of where we're at in terms of many of our clients, they're embarking on journeys towards, if you like, postmodern ERP, so more specifically S4HANA. But what does that mean for their data? Well, for the vast majority of these, ERP remains as a system of record. So for all the key data domains in the business, S4HANA remains kind of the system of record for all these key data domains. But often the organizational approach to managing this data is kind of fragmented. It relies heavily on manual data creation forms and replication through manual means. Some of the workflow measures wrapped around this data are often offline and not transparent in terms of where they are within an overall business process. And many of the forms can be related to legacy hand-downs and are in an unstructured and different formats.
Importantly, Callum, what we've noticed in our customer client base as well is whether they're on ECC or S4, many still the same data problems.
Yeah, so that approach, the result, as you said, Dan, is exactly that. So ECC or S4 world, the approach to data is kind of time and resource intensive in terms of data management practices. And what that means is there's direct and indirect costs. So examples of direct costs are the labor costs associated with data maintenance, and the indirect cost could be ticketing downstream. So we think of support calls. So we try to measure the success rate of any data management practice projects on the number of support calls that can be associated with data kind of mismanagement. Yeah, so if we relate this back to the SAP world then, and examples of this manifesting into problems, by line of business, you can think in the procurement scenario, you may have various incorrect or incomplete supplier master data and open to abuse in terms of maverick spend, non-strategic supplier spend, and potentially opportunities for missed rebates. In the logistics line of business, you could have incorrect lot sizing procedures, missed maintenance of MRP profiles, and then high incidence rates of material obsolescence as an outcome of mismanagement of kind of MRP procedures. In the sales world, in reality, you could have bad examples of customer master data for addresses, which will incur cost in wasted deliveries, and not to mention the damage in customer loyalty and reputation. But the key message being that essentially this is reflected in the transactional processing because the way ERP is structured. Yeah, so now we're approaching this S4 world. Organizations we see and we're currently working with in the data management area, their focus is usually sharpened around system change. So we thought, right, let's go back to kind of the literature then and understand why this happens. And what we found is the approach happens basically because data practices, as is in 2B worlds, underpin a lot of the critical success factors associated with new platform migration in ERP worlds. So what does this mean for kind of your journey to S4HANA and our customers' journey to S4HANA? We see it typically as an opportunity for realignment of data lifecycle management practices. Again, coming back to the analogy of moving house, you can associate these data lifecycle management practices and tool sets with business outcomes that are desired in the 2B world. And basically, we see it as an opportunity to refresh your SAP data hygiene. So by that, we mean not just taking junk in, junk out concepts and lay the foundations for data-driven management going forward on the new architecture, so the S4 worlds. And that's really important in terms of the S4 world and the customers we're working with in terms of the analytical elements they require out of S4. And taking technology aside, we see it as an opportunity to re-engage the business and educate the significance of data on what outcomes they're trying to achieve through ERP.
And you could probably spot a data issue on that slide with a typo.
Yeah, so obviously with your S4 migration, there will be an ETL. And again, that kind of aspect of the project is heavily focused on by SAP. So they have tools around data services, rapid data migration, the HANA data migration cockpits. They have all that kind of area covered due to the fact of the phasing out of the LS&W approach to data management. But we see it as much more than that, and a much more broader topic in terms of your overall approach. So again, going back to the moving house analogy, and I keep going back to that, there is a lot of upfront work when you're moving house. So we see, certainly a lot of businesses we deal with, we see a focus sharpened on discover and analyze phase. So before you even get to an ETL phase, you should have a data strategy. So what does this encompass? You should really understand the data domains that are critical to your business, the sources of these data domains, the contributors, who fills in what information, where, when, why, how, the stakeholders within the organization that rely on this key data as reporting outcomes. You should definitely have an understanding of that. And then mapping it back, again, we always come back to value outcomes in terms of our solutions. So you should understand how the data is created upstream, but how downstream it affects your organization. And then early on in the phase, we believe it's critical to get wider business engagement, understand the value and the vision for data management practices on the new platform to keep the new platform unpolluted. So going back to the solutions then, so what we have basically done is took a lot of the strategy work around data management practices and ERP and tried to reflect all that within a pragmatic kind of solution portfolio for enterprise resource planning, specifically SAP. So our core solution portfolio at Bluestonex looks like this. So within your discovery phase, we have programs which are basically focused on passive reports, so looking at areas where data issues arise, specifically ditto functionality. So one of the key aspects of S4HANA is the new concept of the business partner. So we actually have tools to check duplicates around the vendor customer area and move some of this legacy data into an archiving environment. Following on from that, we have our core MDM engine, which we call Maextro, the core governance platform. So this is around post-ETL, looking after the data creation and lifecycle of data records, associating it with owners, policies and procedures, and providing, more importantly, a simple UI for data establishment. And then we have the Align product, which is a new product to the family. The Align is associated with reactive data. So if you think of the scenario of an acquisition, you may have reactive measures that you have to put in place to ensure the integrity of the data coming into the system. But not only that, we take it a step further in terms of mass correcting the data to be on the target system. So to implement these solutions, we have kind of developed in collaboration with many of our customers a data management framework. So this encompasses 4 key elements, which is firstly the identify. So that's mainly focused on establishing which data domains, the contributors, the consumers of this. And in this phase, we utilize passive data governance reports such as Ditto solutions to get a barometer of and the readiness for S4HANA in terms of data maturity. Moving on to the plan phase, what we see there is more of a methodology. So this is more around establishing what roles, workflow, and what the organizational approach is to ongoingly maintain high quality levels of master data, and coming up with an architecture for data integration. So this may be, for example, in the S4 world, you could have bolt-ons around S4 such as C4C, Ariba, where as part of the Maextro solution family, we allow establishment of data from them peripheral sources. Deploy then is more focused around your BAU track, so your creation of data in your BAU data stream, which ensures that you're operationally efficient in terms of the ERP stuff that you do. And this is more around enforcing rules around the data, so how the data should be created and what value should be populated within the ERP environment, and business standards to ensure that this is created correctly across the enterprise. And the monitor phase then is around not letting the effort slip, so you put in all this hard work in the first 3 phases, make sure you don't pollute the new environment. And actually, what we see is adding more value is monetizing the value of clean data in the business outcomes. So if we map this back to kind of our Maextro solution portfolio then, what we use in terms of our approach to data management is a lot of Ditto functionality. So I believe Feroz is going to show you a scenario around how Ditto could be used in the identify phase of this data management framework. Then today, hopefully, we'll also move on to showing you around the methodology of how we actually implement ongoingly these BAU solutions, specifically aimed at the core Maextro data governance engine. And then I believe Dan is hopefully going to show you some of the data health check cards we've got for your ECC or S4 environments and the Align. Okay, so going back to our data management framework then, right, where do we actually start with this whole approach to data? So these data readiness reports, if you like, get a current state of play. They allow us to establish the current level of maturity in terms of our data management, and they allow the bedding of core business processes to be discovered. So after that, I'm going to hand over to Feroz to give you a little flavour of some of the technology that we use in this identify phase.
Yeah, thank you, Cal. Good morning, everyone. So what is Ditto? Ditto, as Callum said, is a kind of a report you run in your ECC system or the ERP system to identify duplicate business partners, whether it be a vendor or a customer. You get a Ditto report as part of your Maextro deployment. It comes as a standard. If you haven't bought the Maextro core engine, you could also buy it separately as a trial license or as a full package license. Yeah, you go on our website and request the license if you haven't got the Maextro. For those customers who have already got Maextro, they can still request Ditto through our website, and then we can deploy the Ditto report to you. So the Ditto report basically can serve purposes for my managers or for my data administrator to identify the duplicate records and then make corrections if required. So I'm just going to quickly jump onto the system and show you guys how do we run this Ditto report. So if you can hand over the control there.
So you should be able to take access files on the right hand side if you make yourself presenter. Try again. Amy, could you allow Feroz to be presenter, please?
Yep, you should have them right now.
That's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just confirm if you can see my screen, Amy. Yeah. Okay, so I've logged on to standard SAP GUI screen, which everybody is going to be familiar with. I'm just going to run my Ditto report here now. Now, for the Ditto to provide me all the analysis, you have to schedule one job in the background to extract all the data from your backend system. You can also upload it via Excel. Now, I'm not going to do that because I'm conscious of time. I've pre-run this data for you, so I'm just going to run the analysis and show you the output of this. So from the variant, I'm just going to select either I can select by country or I can select for all. I'm just selecting show me all my GB customers, and I want to show them in the tree, and I don't want to I only want to see the invalid or the duplicate record. So it's a simple report you run, and there you see the output in there. On the top, you have all the metadata, which is very useful data for you to look at, analyze. You know, it's telling me that I've got 191 in total vendors, out of which 95 are invalid, 64 are duplicates, 32 are unique, and total active are 20. So active as in last 6 months, you had some transactions, whether it be a PO or an FI posting against them. But if you scroll through to the right, then you get another interesting stat here, which tells me that Out of 191, there were 108, which was recently created as in last 6 months. And you can see still 51 were created like invalid or with the bad data. So you can see straight away there's a problem. Now, the problem could be because you haven't got the rules or governance policy in place, so people are still creating the duplicate. Now, that's just to see the metadata and to see some stats, but you can then go on to this tree structure and look at this. So the first category is what we call as the sin bin. The sin bin is where all the invalid data is clubbed into. So the invalid data, as in you're missing a VAT number, you're missing a postcode, you're missing a city. Now, this can be based on rules you define in Ditto. You could set up the rules to go into sin bin, and then you can put, so if you're missing a description of a vendor, if it doesn't conform to certain number of characters, you could put them all in the sin bin. So that's the sin bin category. The other one is showing me all the duplicates under the city and the name. So you can see these are all the vendors that were created duplicate with the same address, so you can clearly see that you can drill down onto them and then review the data and then do your analysis. So this Ditto, just to summarize, is just giving you a snapshot of how bad your data is and what you need to do to correct the data as you can do it.
And this is for address data only?
This is for the address data only, for the address view only, not for, if you want to check other banking data and other, you have to use other part of Maextro align functionality to do it.
Yeah. And can I just ask, Faraz, the X factor column there, we're not referencing to the ITV show here, are we?
No, that's just the X factor is the algorithm we use to calculate the best matching number of characters based on the description. So it's like a fuzzy search we use within Ditto.
But I guess more importantly, it gives you a barometer in terms of approaching the business partner concept in S4, how big that kind of exercise in your ETL phase is going to actually be.
Okay. So at this point now, I'm just going to hand it over back to Callum to continue with that. Okay. Yeah, you're the presenter now.
So hopefully we've got the screen back.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done the identify stage. What's next?
So moving on with our data management framework. Thanks for that from Faraz. I think that was a useful insight. So looking at the organization then, so where do we actually start in terms of building a to-be data governance framework on your S4 environment to ensure that basically you don't pollute the new environment? So there is various steps you can take on the existing system in terms of organization. So you can start to architect what your approach should be. So based on your SAP environment, should you have a central hub? Should you have a local or hybrid structure to data management? But more importantly, aligning the business with this. So who are the current resources and stakeholders for data management? And then begin to develop kind of a data governance operating model. So you could kind of profile who are the requisitioners, who are the stewards, who are your data customers within your business, and who are responsible for each data domain. And kind of the output of that would look like this. So yeah, this is just an example of kind of the opportunity that S4 provides, or a move to the new ERP environment. The shift basically should go from a reactive governance model, from what we see basically from our customers. Definitely it is more of a reactive ERP data governance model to proactive. So breakdowns should be reported to data domain stewards. They should be looking at solutions in terms of what values to put in certain fields. And then a top-down approach in terms of the policies and procedures and the approach to data. And then the training on terms of the operational how-to, so how to execute within the business environment and the data required to execute within the business environment. So again, moving on to object deployment methodology. So this is more around, I have a vision, I have a strategy, I now need to implement this for each object. So whether that be business partner, material, GL, cost center, profit center, it's kind of not agnostic to any kind of object. So this is how we typically approach it. because from our experience that approaching this in small bite-sized chunks is kind of the best way to build it from the bottom up. So we have RDS templates with our core governance engine, which you can adopt for each data domain.
And by that, Callum, you mean an out-the-box solution that deals with a business process, has fields and forms that users and stewards would use?
Yeah, so within that box, there's various tips and tricks. There's obviously the standard SAP data models. There's integration APIs on the cloud platform, which we'll talk about later. And there is just the core governance engine, which is basically its own workflow engine. So we have native workflow to the application, and we also have a business rules engine, which is written in the application namespace as well.
So this methodology then is kind of, it helps customers focus on the process, the governance, the business rules when we're in that kind of plan phase and we've deployed Maextro and now we're ready to start kind of building what those processes
exactly.
look
So
like.
this is kind of the mobilization of that plan phase, if you like. So what we try to do is put an example from our past experiences of how this organization model would look in a real world scenario. So yeah, an example was a key business stakeholder wants to track some new information, then it works up chain in terms of the data steward reviews the request, agrees, disagrees. Again, the workflow should supplement all this in the native engine. They discuss this request, it's collaborative, and it's taken into the workflow stream. The business process owners make the decision, and then it's approved, and then IPC implements it, and then it's ready for operational use. So it's kind of putting some process around how you operate in terms of data creation.
Yeah, and this would represent a typical RDS template that we have in Maextro, right? So this is what organizations are kind of striving for when they talk about processes.
And it's important to note that this is not dependent on S4HANA. It's a best practice approach to ERP data management. So whether you're S4, whether you're 4.6, whether you're ECC, it is kind of a best practice approach to establishing good reference and master data. Okay, so we've done all the upfront work then. We look at mobilizing what we call the core engine. So am I going to look after my BAU data every day? So Maextro has its own namespace programs in terms of looking after core BAU SAP data. This is wrapped around workflow, a rule engine, establishing owners and policies and procedures around data, and more importantly, because of the complex nature of the ERP, providing simple UIs and APIs for data establishment. So like I said, the actual solution family, this is the core Maextro engine. It's supported as an ECC add-on. It's supported as an S4, excuse me, as an S4 add-on. The concept is data is processed in staging tables, and only when it's fit for operations usage is it moved into the operational environment. What you're going to see today is data via universal work list. So that concept promotes a predefined scope. It gives the users responsibility, and it pushes out data actions, more importantly, for the establishment of good data. The business rules is kind of enforced all the way throughout the process, and this is specifically targeted at reducing error incidence rate downstream in transaction processing. So with that, sorry, a little bit more on the architecture. This resides in your core ERP or S4 environment as an ABAP add-on. We hook into other SAP toolsets, so we support document management integration. We have SAP Fiori-based applications, UI5 applications for data management in terms of data approval, data creation. And we also have a number of APIs available on the SAP Cloud platform. So in scenarios such as Ariba, C4C integration for data creation, we have that portfolio of APIs available on the cloud platform.
Yeah, and also just to mention around APIs, we also utilize APIs for things like postal code checks, bank information, etc., etc. Okay, thank you, Callum. So hopefully we framed it as in we identify, we plan, we have our governance, we know our processes, we have data models, we know what we need around our rules, and now it's about running BAU. So I'm going to hand over to Feroz once again. I will come back and show you some of the nice frilly stuff. What Feroz is going to show you, again, Amy, if you could make him presenter, what Feroz is going to show you is straight out the box, 2 transports. This is what Maextro looks like, whether it be in your ECC or an S4 system.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Dan. I'm just going to log on to Maextro core engine now. So the process starts with, so for this demo purposes, we're going to take an example of somebody requesting a vendor. So as Dan and Callum said, whether you're doing an ECC or S4HANA, the process isn't going to fundamentally change. So I'm going to request a new vendor now. So I'll do create request. I fill in basic minimum information which is required within Maextro. I'm not going to delve into all of those fields that are required in here. So I'm just going to fill in a request description saying a new vendor is required. It can be any description. This is used purely for reporting purposes. You select the required organization within Maextro, the region codes and the priority. And the most important one is where in Maextro everything hangs off is the template. So I select the template code. Now this template, it could be an S4HANA template or ECC depending upon which system you're running in. Now as soon as I've selected the template here, now you can see as part of our governance policy, we make people search for it before they create for a new one. Now I could search on any of these criteria. So the good thing here is you can configure the way you want people to search for this. And whether you are in ECC or S4HANA, the best practice is you search it. And we could add more checks in there if it is S4HANA as well. So I'm just going to search based on the postal code in here. So I gave a postal code, and I don't need to specify all of it. I could just use the wildcards or the asterisks in there, and I search for it. Now Maextro would then go and look for all the vendors that match that postal code, and it's going to come back with the the matching records based on the postal code. Now, the good thing about here is, you could do an early adoption, which what Callum was mentioning earlier. We could also search and go and search the customer database. If in S4HANA world, because the customers, vendors are going to be all same, sharing the same address. So in here, as part of the governance policy, we could ensure that you're not creating duplicate records right in ECC itself. So all these things are possible.
So if I read this right, during the plan and identify stage, we're able to run reports that can associate and tell me where potentially I've got duplicates. But this is now, we're in a BAU, business as usual world. People want new vendors, new customers. We're going to enforce the same types of checks.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is interaction in the operations environment.
Yeah. So this is setting up your rules ready for S4HANA, right policies in place early in the stage of migration. Okay. So I've done my search. I know I need to create a new vendor, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. Now, in Maextro terms, as Callum was saying earlier, it's all about managing a process, best practices, whether you are ECC or S4. This is not going to change. So when you migrate to S4, you can pretty well take all of that process across to S4 as well. You don't have to redefine them. This will not change. So the process in Maextro looks something like this, but obviously you can define your own process. In this one, you start with the first step, which is somebody approving the request. Then this can also go to, we can collaborate with the third-party systems or third-party vendors. This can go to my vendor, an email or a web link to SAP Cloud, where they can provide all the required details for you to fill in, and then it can come back into Maextro and the processing and then start.
So we're creating a request for a new object, a new customer or a new vendor, right?
Yeah.
But the request could come from a third-party system, a third party via APIs, or a manual request.
That's
like
correct,
this.
yeah. So we have standard APIs which we hook in. So if you want to have this coming in from Ariba, it can, or it can also come from your ticketing system if you wish to. Okay, and the process doesn't just end on vendor. You could then very well carry on and create your info record. So that's the beauty of Maextro. It's not limited to one object, one process. You can pretty well link all the different parts of the same process.
And Charles, this is a standard template that comes out the box that Alan mentioned, yeah?
That's correct. So
customers can still do write their own processes via the config.
Yes. So everything then comes as standard. So if you're buying a Maextro tool, you get, as part of the Maextro, you get the standard templates. And if you want to run vanilla SAP standard processes, you just adopt our Maextro templates and you are up and running within days and weeks. Now then you move on to the data tab. This is where you fill in the basic information. So for demo purposes, I'm just showing you, but the user need not see this data. So the whole concept of Maextro is you only show the data which is required for the user to see. So I can limit the number of fields that appear on the screen. So as a requester, I need to flip through this. Then I go on to the next one, which is the org view, what we call it. So again, this is an important feature of Maextro where we allow parallel processing or the mass processing. So this is telling me the vendor can be created across one.
So we can do multiple organizations, same with the material, right? You could create it for multiple plants, sales orgs, warehouses.
More importantly, automate. So you know where the material is going to be required in your supply chain from your analysis up front. So why would you want to give the user opportunity to select this? You could automate and prescribe the data and where it's created.
Yeah.
So it's moving towards that data automation.
So I'm just going to fill in this basic one in here. So again, the fields you see on the screen can be customized, can be reduced depending upon the business role. You don't need to have all the fields that normally appear on your vendor screen. Okay, then I just mark status complete, and then I'm going to just save the request. So at this stage, the request gets created, the workflow kicks in, which is the Maextro workflow, and then people are going to get the email notification in their Outlook email box, and then they can click on, and then the process then carries on. So I'm just going to quickly touch upon the task list. So as I said, the request could either come directly in your mailbox, or it could I could just log onto my task list, and then I can see all my open tasks against my name in there. So this is my task list. Because I'm an administrator here, I see all the tasks. But usually, if you are only a data responsible for purchasing data, you would only see in accounts payable data.
And we're seeing it in SAP GUI because this is warts and all out the box.
Okay.
I'll show the nice stuff in a second or
Yeah.
two. So am I right in thinking then, so we've done our identification and on our analysis, different reports that we've got within Maextro. We've established workshops, data governance, processes via workshops with the customer, and their stakeholders. We deploy Maextro, we start running business as usual processes through Maextro and start establishing and building up our rules if we don't already know them.
Okay. So and then if I'm going to be doing all this task, I would go into this task and then process my data.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, am I right in thinking, like, we work with quite a few customers, the blue sky for them is to have everything rule-based where there's no keying in of information.
Yeah.
The reality from what we've experienced is you'd be lucky to know a lot of those rules up front. The more that you know, brilliant, but this out the box is giving you a platform for defaulting rules, making conditional rules, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and the beauty is going to be you can carry the same rule across to S/4HANA.
Yeah.
So you're not retraining users. The process would remain the same. This will not change, even though in S/4HANA, you may call it as business partner, but in Maextro terms, you're still dealing with process steps and your rules. You still carry that. So early adoption is the key here.
So can you show us then, Farah? So that's great. So we've dropped it. We've talked about rules. We haven't really shown it on the screen. Can we just show how you would conduct or configure a business rule, and then Maextro would utilize it?
Yeah. So as part of this, then we were going to show the align, but let me just take you through this. So I'm logged on to Maextro Core Engine. This is the config menu here. I'm just going to quickly run through one rule which we have defined for our align processes. So there are different types of rules, which I'm not going to go into all of those. So just pick up one rule here. So this is how you define the rule. Now this is a simple rule which we have written in Maextro, saying, list out all the product that's missing product hierarchy. So if I just go into the rule details in here, so this is kind of simple rule saying if the material group is 001, then the product hierarchy cannot be blank, which means you need a product hierarchy against it. So that's this kind of simple rules you can write it. Plus, then you also have all these rule governance in there. You could have all sorts of business justification, business description, so you can track it, who wrote the rule.
So if I was on ECC6 and I had my rules and I was started to establish my rules, I could load them into here, start affecting the data now, but also when I move to S4. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you basically take across all of this to S4. So
Okay.
the fundamentals of the business are not going to change. That's what we're saying. You'll still work with this.
Okay. So based on that rule set, and this is the next stage, which I think on our kind of methodology we had identify, plan, deploy, and then the last step was the align function, which is what we're going to show now. So based on the rules that I've created, you now want to run those rules over legacy data. That legacy data might be an SAP or it might be in an external system.
Correct.
Yeah? So let's just quickly show that because I'm conscious of time.
I'm just going to quickly run through the align functionality within Maextro. So I'm just going to not talk through this. I'm just going to quickly run. So from the drop down, I'm selecting the align function in here. I'm selecting against material master. I'm just going to do the reason codes. And then I'm just going to run this analysis for a subset of data, which is going to be
and this importantly could be a variant in the backgrounds that runs overnight or periodically. But the key principle bringing back to data practices is you're doing health checks constantly on your data pipelines in your ERP environment.
Yeah, so the report is running now in Maextro. Now this is going to go in and check all the material master records, and the rule which we have seen earlier is going to now apply the rule to my set of data in there. So as usual, I just log on to my task list, and then I look at the align request in here. So this is the one I just created. So the first thing I do is I review the data. So this is the report which you call as align report. So this report tells me all the material numbers that does not conform to all the rules that are assigned for that given template. So you can see clearly these are all the materials that I need to look at and address some of these materials. So if I click on the rule details here, you can clearly see on the bottom half of the screen, what the rule is. It's telling me exactly what we have just seen earlier. And then it also allows you the ability to correct it here if you want to. There are lots of options in there. You could do a mass autocorrect and things like that, and then ultimately run a program in Align to update that data back in SAP. So there's a lot of features in there which probably would need another session just to look at Align.
Yeah, and what we see with practices today, obviously people are doing this offline on Excel and then loading in via LSMW. Again, so what we're trying to get the concept is you do all your planning, you do your identification of where you've got problems with data, you start building your business rules, you're running business as usual processes via Maextro, and then based on those rules that you've already created, you run that over legacy and external data to improve the data.
Okay. I'll hand over to Dan at this stage. I'm just conscious of time now.
So it was very quick, but we'll just touch on some of the nicer UI. So obviously we've shown you warts and all SAP GUI. So let me just show you what it can look like. So obviously for people running SAP Fiori on-prem, great, you get a bunch of apps and things like that. As I said, we use two different technologies, SAP UI5 and Slipstream. But basically, what you've seen in GUI is available. It's available on the SAP Cloud Platform, which we take care of as part of the services. And I think there was a few questions which I'll answer in a quick second. But in terms of health checking and things like that, so let me just show this, for example. So I might want to query my material master And I might want to have a look at how many requests are coming through, for example. So we've got some quite nice reporting capabilities here. We can see it by templates. Remember, templates are individual processes. You might have templates by account group or by material types. So you've got this capability, and you can actually track, you know, am I on time? Am I hitting the SLAs that I defined within Maextro? So again, coming back to process and tracking those processes. We've also got quite an interesting stat around how many fields were inputted manually versus how many were derived by rules and populated automatically by Maextro, which is, again, another nice one. And then lastly, just on data quality, this might take a little bit of time. So on data quality, we will monitor BAPI errors, which is what Maextro uses to create and update information, but also how many times have I had to review the data because there was a problem, or how many times have I rejected it because the data was bad. So we have some quite simple and yet powerful KPIs. There are others there, but these are the kind of ones that I wanted to show you. This is all living either on a SAP Fiori Launchpad, whether it be in cloud. If you haven't got Fiori today, you could move to our cloud platform, which hosts all this stuff. Or if you've got those capabilities today, these apps can be used. The same for creating requests. So Farah showed you SAP GUI, people keying it in directly to GUI. You would use create request apps within the Maextro world. Hopefully, and very lastly, and I will just pick out, we think we've got 2 minutes, we'll just share with you what we did on a particular case study. This was posted on Material Master, and Callum, if you just want to pick out the key points, and then we'll move to Q&A.
Yeah, so this was quickly just to touch on a very complex supply chain, 9 organizational units in one request, but the KPIs speak for themselves now. We've moved towards a model of data automation. We've removed over 120 manual keystrokes, and 95% of all requests are coming in on time, in full, and it's creating good quality master data. And the big thing is the time to market for the business has reduced by an average of 9 days.
Yeah, that's a good stat. And there we see there, so we're using 70 business rules, and still there is a long way to go. A lot of the challenges that we find with customers, they don't know the rules that they want to kind of impose. And that can be a gradual thing because you configure them yourself. So that's Maextro. That was the Maextro family. So what you've seen there is Ditto, which is the analysis and looking at troops. The governance, which is the core engine, applying rules, creating rules, policies, creating data, changing data, and then finally using that rule set and running it back over legacy data is the align function. I won't talk about the roadmap. We've got a lot of stuff in here that we're doing around, you know, data automation and data services that we're providing, as well as software. But yeah, as you can see, we're pretty busy boys at the moment. What we will finally just leave you guys with is that we are offering a kind of free 1-day data discovery. It's a workshop where we start identifying and planning what does your new to-be world of processes and data look like. So if it's of interest, get in contact with us. Amy, sorry, I know we've got about 4 minutes left.
It's fine, yep.
Q&A?
Yep, of course. And so we have had a couple of questions in. So are you happy to answer these now, Dan?
Sure, yeah.
Perfect. So the first one is it worth transferring all customer and vendor master data to business partners and ECC legacy system before moving to S4HANA? Is this a good step to do?
Views on the word. I don't think technically it makes any difference to us.
No, but that would be as part of your phase, I would suggest. But more importantly, it's what coming up with the governance model of what you want to do in the 2D world around data creation. I think that's the more important.
Yeah, so would it add value is the question? Probably not, because you're going to have to do it at some point anyway. You'll probably save a task down the road, but yeah, I think that's an optional. I'm not quite sure if it would add massive value, to be honest.
Great, thank you. Is there an option to create multiple master data at once? For example, multiple materials or vendors wanted?
Okay, so we have something in the pipeline to do multiple objects, but what you saw Farrell's doing was a material, and we were creating it across multiple divisions, multiple plants. Same with vendor and customers. We can create multiple partner functions at once, But at the moment, every individual request, because what you were seeing there is business as usual. So unless it's an acquisition and a take on, that's where we would use our other features where we are using mass processing. But as a rule, no, we wouldn't typically do that, because you're living in more of an Excel upload world rather than a kind of rule-based Maextro world.
What about creating multiple warehouse views for one material or plant?
Yeah, that's there.
So that was the key theme from the case study. You could create in one request as many organizational entities as you want for the data.
Yeah, so you might have 100 warehouses, 100 plants that you want to do all in the same request with different rules, and that's managed in the one request. Yeah, so the answer is yes.
Brilliant, thank you. How does this tool work for those customers that have already built workflows to manage the life cycle of data, i.e. if you can't have multiple workflows working on the same data objects?
Well, Maextro, as you hopefully saw, has its own kind of built-in workflow. So requests coming in either via third-party systems or requested manually would be run via Maextro workflows. Again, the stuff that we do on the UI5 in terms of inbox and approvals and things like that, but Maextro has its own workflow. It's a lot easier because it's configuration based. It's not kind of business rule framework or ABAP. It's very much a drop down and assigning user groups and people to user groups. It's a real simple and yet very, very powerful, because it's based on all sorts of rules, the workflow is, but it's configurable, and that's the key. That's why we specifically didn't go down SAP workflow route.
Great. And what data volumes can the tools handle?
Well, we haven't come across any that has caused a problem, and we always benchmark things anyway. So as of yet, there's nothing that's been caused it to kind of, to struggle performance-wise. The Ditto one is how we've managed when you have a large kind of customer and vendor database, is we will schedule the reports to do the analysis in the background. Sometimes we'll split it up by country as well for Ditto to run effectively. But Align is pretty good, and again, we would advise the customer on their selection criteria when they're doing that.
Great, thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions because we did start a couple minutes late. So can I not just get away with the standard SAP tool set for migrating to S4?
You can, but it is very limited in terms of what you get with a HANA license. I don't think we've got time to go into the full details of that, but basically SAP want you to buy a full data services license. That's
and what we're trying to talk and get the message is not just about solutions, it's about methodologies and having processes and governance in place. You're not going to get the amount of due diligence and governance with those solutions, and we know that because that's why we built Maextro.
Brilliant. Final question, what are the main differences between the Maextro and MDG?
That's a good one. Do you want to reel them off, Cal? I'll give you the headline and let Callum explain the technical detail. But from a business and an ROI point of view, licensing would be one. We license, at an object level, but the price difference is significant. You don't need infrastructure because it will reside within your core. The skills that you require to implement Maextro, you'd probably need one business analyst and representation from the business. With MDG, you are not talking an army, but certainly 5 different skill sets from PI, PO, BRF, workflow, MDG consultants, and ABAPers. Maextro, you need an analyst that can configure.
Yeah, and just to touch on that one, our object coverage is greater, so we cover everything from equipment, project systems, WBS, far greater than what SAP covers with just MDG in terms of customer, vendor, business partner, and material.
Any others, Amy?
Great. No, that is actually the end now. So if there's anything else you guys from Bluestone want to add?
No, just thank everybody for attending. Some really good questions there, and as I said, the offers there and a data discovery workshop.
And any feedback would be appreciated.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the slides anyway, Amy, right? So
yeah, they'll be on the website.
Yeah, great stuff.
Lovely. Well, thank you for presenting today, and thank you for everyone for attending. Enjoy the nice weather now.
Cheers.
Thanks all.
Bye.